I got the time right here. I got the time right now. Uh-huh. That's right. Time is all I got right here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, here in the internet world, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you tune in to get the real scoop. My name is Don Strong. I am here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I am interviewing Brother David from Brooklyn.
Time, she's my friend.
Hello, everyone. This is Brother David from Brooklyn. Glad that I'm with you today. Today, I'm going to talk about the so-called Defense Department. In 1949, what used to be called the War Department, the name was changed to the Defense Department. I'm wondering about that. Defending what? And I think it's still the War Department. War makes a lot of money for those who rule. And what they call the Defense Department is really a War Department. The United States is an empire. Its tentacles are all over the world. The United States has hundreds and hundreds of bases, perhaps even as much as 1,000 bases. Big bases, bases as large as a city, medium-sized bases, and small bases in many different countries. Now, the reason I'm saying this is still the War Department, because war makes a lot of money for those who rule the United States. And the people don't rule the United States. The ruling class, a small group of people, rule the whole country. And they make money when war is in progress. As an empire, we ride herd, the United States does, rides herds on many, many smaller countries all over the world, whether it's Africa, Asia, or South America. And that is the truth. So when you're running an empire, you're not thinking about democracy. So, but it's quite clear that if you lie enough about democracy, people start believing it. And if you control all the sources of information for people at every school level, whether it's elementary or high school or college, you got it made. Now, here's the thing about the War Department. The War Department needs personnel, soldiers. And what they have done is convince people that are getting involved in war is somehow a patriotic duty. Most people believe that, but it really is. Or are you in the service of those people at the very top, that small group of people who run the country? Because the people don't run it. And those people at the top make lots of money with contracts and selling equipment, tanks, planes, and all sorts of equipment. So in this country, more than half the federal budget goes towards warfare. Is that what people want? A warfare budget that fills the pockets of those who rule at the top? Now, I don't think so. I don't think so, because I don't believe that those half of the population here who is poor and near poor likes all that money that's being sent for warfare. That's a big problem. but that's what we have. Now, how do you get the personnel to go and fight these wars? In other words, you need soldiers who are trained to kill people and possibly will be killed themselves in warfare. And so sometimes you have a draft, but they had to stop the draft after the Vietnam War because that's a problem for the professional class and the ruling class. They don't want their relatives going into the army and being at risk. So what we have now is a sort of poverty draft where the poor people and struggling people quite often go into the military service and programmed to think it's always patriotic to go and kill people in Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else they feel like sending you and having you think that that's patriotic. But empires are very good at programming people to do what they want done, those at the leadership level of empire, to enrich themselves. So war is like a big business. A lot of money is made out of war. So we need to think about it in a different way. We don't need to believe that being necessarily in the military, and I must say, full disclosure, that I'm a veteran of the military, and I didn't think about those things when I joined the military. But as I got older and did more studying, I learned a lot more. So I think everybody should be studying about why we're sending our young people to be killed in all these places like Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth. So we need to think about this and analyze what's going on and who benefits from it. Most of us don't understand who benefits from this. And I think that's so important that every individual start studying on your own about what's happening. Think about Vietnam. And why did we go to Vietnam? We had no business in Vietnam. Absolutely no business to send our young people over there to kill folks and kill, rob, and rape, and what soldiers do, and or possibly be killed or damaged themselves. So let's think about that. The Defense Department is really the War Department, and it has to do with keeping other nations in check, either by sanctions, warfare, or intimidation with military force. We don't need a big Navy with maybe 12, 15 full-size aircraft carriers that cost maybe 15, 20 billion dollars to build and maintain. Why do we have that? That has nothing to do with defending this country. And we ought to think about the fact that there's no way the United States could win a world war. That's impossible. You think about countries like Russia and China, they are fully nuclear armed countries. And what would it be like to have a full-scale war? So we ought to cut back on the so-called quote-unquote Defense Department, that's really a War Department, and use some of that money that comes with the taxes for things that have to do with good social and economic benefits for the masses of people. There's no reason why we should have all these poor people and people out of work and be spending over $1 trillion every year, plus what we spend for the CIA and FBI and other intelligence organizations. So people ought to start thinking about these things and asking questions. Why am I going to Afghanistan to kill? So think about that, and think about that well, and start studying on your own so you understand that it's not the Defense Department, it's the War Department.
Okay, Brother David, I have a question for you because you mentioned in full disclosure that you are a veteran. And
Yes.
I'm curious, um, what motivated you as a young person to want to join the armed forces? What was the situation?
Oh, that's an excellent question, because as a young person, I was of the mind that I thought it was a duty as a citizen to get involved in the military. So I became a military officer, but it took some real studying after I got out of the active duty to look into this. That's why I'm telling people, I think you should start studying on your own. So I started learning, real learning, after I got out of all these schools that never taught me these things. So I'm suggesting that if you really want to learn something and learn what the real deal is, you want to know what the real deal is, you have to study on your own. And you can't go by the corporate media, and corporate media is owned by the same people who like warfare, the television, the radio, the all the forms of media, education. They control everything. So it's necessary, if you want to be not a victim, but understand the system you live in, it's so important to study on your own. And I emphasize that because that's the key to understanding the system and protecting yourself from these rapacious capitalists and imperialists that run the United States, that control the United States, and essentially control much of the world.
Wow, that's a big assignment. So I'm wondering that when you started your study, uh, I get the impression that you're very self-actualized and self-motivated type of person. And some people are pretty good at creating their own curriculum for self-study. But for somebody, what do you think about mentors? I mean, did you have a mentor? Was there?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get some mentorship, there are ways to get that. You got to look up people like Dr. Ben. You have to look up and look at people like Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and there are other people. You have to look up people like Chris Hedges. You have to look up people like Professor Noam Chomsky. And, you know, there are many people. That's just a start. So you have to do some research if you're going to learn anything. You can't get it by looking at the corporate media. I'm talking about even the New York Times. If I get the New York Times every day, but I have to decipher what they're saying. And if you don't know how to decipher what they're saying, they can make a fool out of you. So it's important to learn these skills and to learn how this country really runs, and to learn that the people don't run it. It's run by the small ruling class, and it's run in their interest. And they don't have their children going in the army and taking the risk of getting killed or killing other people. They're going to send the ordinary people into the army, and in this poverty draft, because they've eliminated the regular draft. And you need to think about that. Who's in the army? Who are they recruiting for the Marine Corps to go all over the world? It's the most mobile force we have, and go over the world and, you know, kill people and possibly be killed or hurt yourself. So it's very important to take these things into your own hands. You have to go and study on your own. You can't depend on corporate media to educate you about what's going on. There's no way you can do that, because if you just depend on corporate media, Fox News or CNBC or any of the ABCs or CBS or any of those organizations in television or radio, the regular corporate radio, and all these people are very good at intoxicating people against their own interests. So that's what I'm talking about. You got to study on your own to understand what is going on.
Well, that's great. I know you've had a lot of success with your students over the years in some specialty areas.
Yes.
And, they all look up to you as a mentor. I think that every once in a while we get an opportunity to run into someone who's an inspiration and someone who kind of gets us on the right path. Of course, there are people like you who are totally self-motivated, who can do it from scratch. But I'd like to wish all of the seekers out there for truth good work in their self-study.
Oh yes, it's important. And my position of teaching a technical subject, the area of aviation, I taught pilots, and but I just didn't leave the curriculum only to pilot training. I talked about other things too. So my students had a one-up on most things. They understood these things, and that's wonderful that I was to kill two birds with one stone. Not only train technically good people, but people who understand how to get information and study what the real deal happens to be.
That's great. Thank you, Brother David. Another enlightening session.
Thank you.
I got the secret here in my shirt pocket. You can have the time you're needed. You can just float with me. Ride it up, baby, ride it, baby. Ride it up like the sea.